I'm Bruce Shwedick from the Crocodilian Conservation Center of Florida, and I'm here today with Avishka Godahewa. Avishka was the very first recipient of the Rafael Crespo Conservation Fund, a conservation grant from CROC, which is the research unit of the University of Florida's Research and Education Center in Fort Lauderdale. Avishka, welcome.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks for joining us today here in St. Augustine.
Thank you very much.
Avishka, you grew up in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Did you grow up in the city or in the suburbs? What was it like when you were young?
I pretty much lived in the suburbs, not in the heart of the city, so I was away from all the Colombo traffic and everything, and I lived just 100 meters away from the coast and 20 meters away from Salties. So it was a good life I had there, and it's very different from America. Yeah, grew up in the suburbs.
Right. And obviously you've been interested in crocodilians for a very long time. When I was young, the first books I read about crocodilians were Crocodiles, their Natural History, Folklore, and Conservation by Gugisberg. I read Eyelids of Morning, The Mignal Destinies of Crocodiles and Men by Alistair Graham, and I read Last of the Ruling Reptiles, Alligators, Crocodiles, and Their Kin by Wilfred T. Neal. What was the first book or the first books you read about crocodilians?
Some great books you mentioned, but for me, I think my first book about the scientific aspect of crocodilians were Crocodiles and Alligators of the World by David Alderton. I think it was published in 2004, but I was pretty young back in 2004 to read anything scientific, but I read it down the line. But before that, I have read certain literature in my mother tongue, which is Sinhalese. But it's not easy to find any literature about crocodilians, the scientific aspect of it in Sri Lanka. At least it was not back in the day. But I found this literature which was basically explaining in Sinhalese how ferocious crocs can be and what part they played in humans' lives back in the day. And then I made the switch to the research aspect of it. So David Alderton's book was the first book which helped me out through that.
I see.
Yes.
I see. Many of the early books that I read mentioned Dr. Paul Darrenaliga, and that sort of created a fascination with me for the crocodiles of Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka in general. Obviously, he was well before our time. So who were you exposed to? Who were your mentors as you were growing up and became more involved with crocodilians?
So Paul Darrenaliga, I think I would not be wrong to say that he's the first and foremost naturalist and biologist of Sri Lanka who went to the extent to document a lot of species and natural history of Sri Lankan species of all animals. And but my mentor personally was Anselm de Silva, the father of modern herpetology. That's what we call him back in Sri Lanka, and he's been he's a very knowledgeable person, and he's been doing work with crocodilians and all sorts of reptiles and amphibians for decades, and he sort of made my path to come to where I am right now. So I consider him one of the first mentors of my career. And then Rom Whittaker is one of the other people, because he has done a substantial amount of research on crocodilians with Anselm de Silva in Sri Lanka back in the 80s, and so far Anselm is carrying out some research in Sri Lanka, up in the northeast and northwestern parts of the island. But before all that happened, it was Rom's and Anselm's work which were able to give us an idea about the status of crocs in Sri Lanka. So those two were one of the main people when I was growing up in Sri Lanka that I looked up onto. Yeah.
I see. So Sri Lanka is home to two crocodile species: the large predominantly freshwater mugger crocodile, and of course the much larger coastal saltwater crocodile. When I was young, I became involved with rearing crocodilians at a very young age, and I understand you became involved in capturing crocodilians at a very young age. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I think I caught my first croc when I was 16 years old, and it was a nuisance animal I got a call for, and the department allowed me to go and capture the animal, and it was a 8-foot animal, I believe, and it was a salty, and it was first time myself interacting hands-on with an animal. But a lot of the stuff I read and I've seen helped me through the process, and I managed to work on it and like get the animal secured without a problem. And I believe that was my start, and I felt confident that day, and ever since I've been doing that.
That's fantastic. So through your connections with Anselm and through the game department, you were able to get permission to capture these nuisance animals?
That's right, yes.
And I know to capture a big animal like that, I don't do it alone. I put together a team. Who was your team?
My team was basically my brother, and my father came along with me for a lot of stuff to manage the logistics, transportation part of it. But my brother has been, so I have to mention that him and I both started this together, where we were looking into how to help mitigate the human-crocodile conflict, deal with nuisance animals, because that's what was we were surrounded by all the time. It's more than research, it's the conflict you hear about when it comes to crocodiles every day. So that's when we decided, okay, we should learn how to do this. Let's get to know the biological aspects of crocodilians and everything, and try to do something to help the department mitigate the problem. So that's where me and my brother decided to go on these relocation missions and capture nuisance animals from outrageous places, and get the animals secured. And mostly we made it a fact to like give the Department of Wildlife Conservation the chance to relocate the animals, because it's the government's duty to properly assess and relocate the animals. But other than that, there were certain instances where we got the approval from the department to relocate animals by ourselves, which none of them, hopefully, we did not get any nuisance calls for the same animal or
Right.
anything like that in
I
the
see.
same area. So I would consider it a success. And
So your brother Avinda,
right.
and you were capturing the crocs. Did you have friends that were helping?
There were a few other friends, but on rescue missions, I have to say no. But there was one other person, Mafas Mohammed. I'm pretty sure you have heard of him, but he's I just got to know him through. I've not known him until we were just friends because of the shared enthusiasm for crocodiles, and we then later started on working on gathering data for crocodile attacks and everything. And I know Anselm was doing that too, so we gathered like the modern data, and all three of us, including my brother, contributors for the Crocbite website, to giving data to Brandon to somehow try to mitigate the conflict. But in captures, it's basically me and my brother and my father, and sometimes just my brother and my father, or me and my brother, or me
I
and
see.
my father.
So
yeah.
you were helping out the game department with
Right.
the sometimes burdensome task of dealing with these nuisance crocs. You were also helping Anselm da Silva collect data on these animals, and then you were helping Brandon Sidlow to collect data for the International Crocbite Database.
That's right.
That's remarkable. And how did you transport these animals?
It's my father's van. It's a Toyota 1996 Toyota Super GL. It's an old van with like luxurious seats and stuff. So it's a lot of my father's bickering.
So you were putting crocodiles in your family's minivan, essentially.
Right.
In your family's minivan, and I think it's fair to say that at least your father was tolerating this.
That's true.
And your parents were supportive of your interest.
Yes, they are.
Yes. So you've come to Florida, and where are you studying now?
I'm currently pursuing my degree, and I'm in between my AA, trying to figure out which university I'm to go to next.
Which university are you at now?
I'm at Broward College,
Mhm.
studying at Broward College, so I will be probably pursuing my degree further with Broward College, or trying to transfer to another university. So this is like a break period where I'm trying to figure out what I have to do. Yes,
And so while you're going to school full time,
I am.
you're also volunteering with the Croc Dogs.
Right.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I've been helping the Croc Dogs led by Dr. Frank Mazzotti for 3 years now since I've been here, and I am, out of many projects which the Croc Dogs do, I am mainly involved in the monitoring program for alligators and American alligators and American crocodiles as indicator species for the Everglades restoration. So what we basically do is monitoring them long term, like for basically for alligators in the marsh. We gather body condition data, percent of alligator holes occupied in the marsh by alligators, and relative density to it as our monitoring program. And then with crocodiles, we focus on monitoring the growth and survival rates, and all this helps us to better understand whether the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan is actually working to it's actually working right.
I see. So you're using the crocodilians as indicator
indicators.
species for the efforts to recover and to restore the Everglades.
Right.
And can you tell me what is happening with the invasive common caiman in South Florida?
That is actually a project. From what I know, it's a project we have been working at Croc Dogs for a while, and we have got new contracts going on too. And there's a project manager new appointed to do all that stuff. I get the chance to go and experience that stuff too, and it's interesting for me. This is my personal opinion because it's an animal introduced to introduced to Florida decades back.
Right, and I have to correct myself because I described it as an invasive species, but we know it's obviously an introduced species.
Right.
It was introduced as a part of animals being imported for the pet trade. But is it considered an invasive species?
I believe so because we are granted permission to remove those animals from the ecosystem. They're definitely non-natives, that much I can say, and they're invasives too to a certain extent because of the competition they have with other crocodilians, especially the American alligators. But this work which we do with Croc Dogs is gonna help us understand better understand whether it's actually a competing species or not. Yeah. So.
And of course, most crocodile survey work is done at night.
Right.
And how many hours, when you go out each night, how many hours do you spend?
That's an interest. It depends on what work we do too. But if you go out on crocodile surveys, it pretty much could be a 5 to 8 hour night out in the middle of nowhere. Beautiful places where no one has access to go to. Luckily for me, I have been working with Croc Dogs and I have the permits to do so with the Croc Dogs with the University of Florida. So it's beautiful places, but you spend a lot of time out there doing these tasks.
And how many hours per week would you say, on average, do you spend with the crocodile surveys and the alligator surveys?
I would say definitely more than it would pass more than full time.
More than full-time. So
Full-time.
full-time student, full-time crocodile field researcher. That's just remarkable.
Thank you.
I have one more question. Obviously, one question I forgot to ask you is you said you sometimes captured these crocodiles under unusual circumstances. Where were they often turning up around Colombo that you would be called in to help out?
Yes, that's an interesting question because I was surprised too. Like my first couple of animals I caught were out in backyards, which I did not really think about the background of like how the animal got there and everything because the nearest water source was a couple of hundred meters away. So that's a safe distance for an animal to travel, I would think, I'd assume. But I have come across animals stuck in backyards of houses or like narrow pavements, and the nearest water source when I did the background research was at least a kilometer away. So that kind of was very interesting and surprising for me to find animals away from water who wander around at night, which the case for mugger crocodiles, they are known to tend to walk about at night and also in the dry season. But salties, that's something which I did not realize, that they walk that far away from water to get to places for whatever they're looking for, prey or new habitats or whatever it is. Yes.
Well, that's really fantastic, and thank you for sharing all of this information with us. I want to mention that Avishka will be one of our very special guests on November 9th for the CROC AID event, which will be held at Sarasota Jungle Gardens. That's November 9th from 5:30 to 9 p.m. You can learn more about CROC AID if you visit the website of the Crocodilian Conservation Center of Florida, which is croccenter.org. CROCCENTER.org. Avishka, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us today. I look forward to seeing you on November 9th.
That's right.
If you invite me, I would love to come out with you in the Everglades, if that might be possible. And I look forward to when we both could be back in Sri Lanka and learning more about what's happening there with crocodiles and people.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Bruce.
Thank you.
Nice.